leave me a comment. It will make me so happy. Howdy, heretics. This is my beautiful daughter, and her grandparents are shunning her because they are Jehovah Witnesses without any natural affection. So I used to be a Jehovah Witness, but I don't want to be a Jehovah Witness. So I left the religion my parents picked for me, and they said they're never going to talk to me again. But the question is, what did my worldly woman do wrong? Well, she tricked me into fornication, but other than that, why can't they send a message of congratulations to their daughter-in-law? So I am what Jehovah Witnesses would refer to as an apostate, and that's the worst thing ever. And they say it's okay to shun people based on 2 Corinthians, where it says you should not talk to someone who calls himself a brother, who's a fornicator, extortionist, or idolater, or a greedy person. Well, first of all, according to Jehovah Witness doctrine, everything the Apostle Paul wrote was written to the anointed, not to the great crowd. Also, the rule for shunning in 1 Corinthians only applied to brothers, not to sisters. And but it doesn't apply to apostates, because who were the religious leader appointed by Jehovah in the time of Jesus? Well, it was the Levites and the house of Aaron. God had elected them when he appeared as a burning bush with no witnesses present. So it was very convenient for Moses, who was of the tribe of Levi, to say that the house of Aaron, which was his brother, should get 3 goats as long as someone broke the rules that Moses wrote. And one of the rules was you shouldn't masturbate. That's a lot of free meat. By the way, I'm also a prophet, so if you masturbate, you should send me $1,000. So say God, he appeared to me as a burning bush. Anyone can say so. But if you believe that, which Christians believe, that God had appointed the Levite and the high priest, well, who did Jesus criticize? He criticized the religious leaders. He walked into the temple, not only to flip tables, but he walked in with a weapon that, as of today, is illegal to wear, to carry in a normal street on a public place in Norway. He made a whip that would be an illegal weapon. So, if anything, there's no place in Bible that says that the appointed leaders should be above criticism. Anyway, I did that. Just like Jesus, I criticized the leaders, be them elected or not. And now, my parents are refusing to talk to their grandkids. So, what did she do wrong? So in the Jehovah Witness propaganda, you see this girl, she's sitting here and in a glass penalty box in the back, and no one talked to her. And they're also punishing the children. But if we see here in this piece of propaganda, when the children finally are approved by the governing body to be talked to again, they love their grandparents. Well, explain to me, please let me know in the comment section. How would you feel if you were abused and you had to be sitting during boring meeting for years, and then after strangers that appointed themselves to the faithful and discreet slave because they don't have any witnesses? Yeah, they are terrible. Yeah, they are terrible. Let me know in the comment if you think it's okay to treat children like this. Just because the mother is disfellowshipped, the children are forced to be sitting in a little box in church, listening to boring speeches about guilt and shame. And then, when the mother is yet approved by the governing body, they can re-establish contact with the grandparents that they never met. And in the Jehovah Witness fairy tale, they love their grandparents. But these things could happen in a Jehovah Witness Kingdom Hall, that the children love the grandparents they meet for the first time. Why? Well, if this would happen like this depiction here, that is a severe case of Stockholm Syndrome. that you accepted abuse to the point where you actually love your abuser.
But when I'm alone, I struggle with whether Jehovah has really forgiven me. One time I was so distraught that I called my father for help. He comforted me with the words of Isaiah 1 verse 18, where Jehovah says that our sins, which are like scarlet or crimson cloth, can become white like snow. Then my father related the Bible account of Manasseh. Manasseh did on a grand scale what was bad in Jehovah's eyes to offend him. He even sacrificed his sons in false worship. He even sacrificed his sons in false worship. He even sacrificed his sons in false worship.
I think that's really sad, because my parents believe that. They believe that if they refuse to talk to me, at one point I'll come crawling back and the grandchildren would love them as long as they are approved by the governing body. Well, the governing body and me are not friends. I criticize them for the way they treat children. And if you want to know what I talk about, it's Australian Royal Commission. You can see what they do, and it was a lot about talk about the 2-witness rule. A child that's abused need 2 witnesses. Otherwise, they will not do it. And the Holy Spirit will not act up as witness number 2. So the governing body claimed that they were elected by Jesus when he appeared invisibly and spoke inaudibly in 1919. So the governing body does not have 2 witnesses. And still, they believe that you're not allowed to criticize them, and if you do, this child is not allowed to meet her grandparents. Well, I also feel sorry for her grandparents, because remember what Jesus said. He said to the religious leader of his time, who was, according to the Bible, elected by God when he appeared as a burning bush. They were elected by God, but Jesus, just like I do, gave the leaders criticism and said, you put on heavy burden on the people, but you yourself will not touch them. Well, look at this lady here. She's not allowed to talk to her child because the governing body said so. And in this picture, they show how time passes and another child grows up while she still is not allowed to have any contact with her child. Well, that is a heavy burden. The governing body says, if we don't approve of a child, you're not allowed to talk to them. That's a heavy burden. Would Watchtower themselves carry that burden? Well, Watchtower don't have children. The governing body members don't have children. But what if they had something else, like a steady stream of income from Norway, and they lose that income of government funding from Satan's system, and they really want the money from Satan's system, and Satan's system says that Jehovah Witnesses have too low moral because the way they treat children. Will they then carry the burden, in this case, lose contact with their money? What's worst? My parents losing contact with their grandchild, or governing body, backed up by Jehovah, losing contact with Norwegian currency? Organization based on love, the answer would be easy. Grandparents losing contact with their children is worse than the richest creature in the universe losing contact with Norwegian currency. But Watchtower changed the doctrine a little bit, just enough that they could lie to Norwegian government and say that we no longer shun, because if you now meet a disfellowshipped brother, disfellowshipped person, they say, I still say brother. If you meet a disfellowshipped brother, you're allowed to say, we invite you to a location or a piece of real estate called Kingdom Hall that is absolutely control of the governing body. So if my parents met me, what would you think they would like to talk to me about? About their grandchild, maybe? But they're not allowed to do that. They would be allowed to invite me to a piece of real estate that is controlled by the government. That's all they have to do. Except if you're an apostate like me. Someone had the audacity to criticize the religious leaders of my time, just like Jesus did. And those leaders were not elected by themselves, they were elected by a burning bush, still with no witnesses present. So, if you read Corinthians, it says, remove the wicked man. And in Norwegian it says, remove the evil man. Evil. And then in 1 Corinthians, and then in 2 Corinthians, it says we should reinstate him. So how can a person just go from being evil to being reinstated in 3 months? That's interesting. I know very few people that I would describe as evil, but that they should change personality, go from evil to nice in 3 months, well, that's interesting. But it also reminds me of the governing body, because it says, who is the faithful and discreet slave? And then it says, what if the evil slave? It's the same slave. The evil slave, the good slave, the evil slave, maybe, I don't know. I don't think Stephen Lett, as an individual, said to himself when he was a young man that I will work as an unpaid cult member and eventually I will raise the rank to governing body and be an arrogant piece of shit. I think he was honest when he started up. But at one point, I do believe that he currently is an evil slave. I think he was at least faithful and nice slave in the beginning. If there's anything, if you believe in the Bible, Corinthians, 1 Corinthians to 2 Corinthians, he went from evil to a good Jehovah Witness. And I think the same in Matthew 24, 45 to 47. The faithful and discreet slave, and then the evil slave. And what's the definition of an evil slave? Well, if he's punishing his fellow slaves, beating them, it says in Norwegian. Who would be beating slaves? Why would he do that? Well, basically an evil slave would do that because of his own interest. Like someone undermine my authority. I don't want to beg my parents to have contact with me. If they don't want to have contact, they shouldn't. But one day they will be gone, and no matter what I do, that day I will regret. So I decided it's better to be extra nice. So I decided to take some pictures of the kid, because my parents at one point, they promised their invisible friend that they would not look at my Instagram, because the only contact we had before I was disfellowship was they were following my Instagram account. And then I was into media. It was first page in the media. It says, this is why Jonas leave the Jehovah Witnesses. So everyone just assumed I would be disfellowshipped. I was front page, the whole front page, picture of me. And all in all, it was 7 pages in the newspaper. So everyone assumed that, safe to assume that he will be disfellowshipped. However, I blamed Satan. Satan controls media. I had nothing to do with this. And the elders, they were very frustrated and they said, why can't you leave? And I said, I want my pet panda. Thank you very much. So they couldn't disfellowship me. And after that, I was also on TV. And still I blamed Satan and wasn't disfellowshipped. But my parents, they jumped to conclusions. They were slightly smarter than the Holy Spirit. So they promised their invisible friend that they would not look at my Instagram. And now I heard from a PMO family member that they asked this PMO family member to go to my Instagram, take screenshot and send to them, because they are in pain and they want to see their grandkid. And this is the cutest baby on the planet. It looks exactly like me. Doesn't have a mustache yet, but if she's anything like her mother, she will. Where do you end up if you follow a blind leader? Well, my parents is currently in a ditch. They can't go to Instagram, but they worked around their promise to Jehovah so that they can get pictures of the baby, and they're too proud to ask. And they haven't sent congratulations to my wicked worldly woman. So I thought someone needs to be the bigger person. So I thought I'll make one of those baby books with pictures. I have it printed and sent to them. But also I don't want them to think that I'm on my way back. So I put some pictures of me doing my activism outside conventions. This is a picture of me and my worldly woman. But if they want to, they can glue those two pictures together, like it was, like porn magazines used to be. Pages used to stick together. So they can glue this together and never have to see their terrible son again. And then they just have baby pictures. So I sent this to them. And the feedback I got through PMOs in the family was that I am manipulative. Being nice. If I believed the Bible, I would quote the following scriptures because it looks like my parents. In the last day, people will be ungrateful. Leave me a comment if you agree. In the last day, people would be ungrateful and without natural affection. And that is very much Jehovah Witnesses. I made a babe. My parents haven't spoken to me since 2017. I given them, or my wife has given them, a grandchild. And they can't even send her an SMS. And then I made a picture book so they can be sitting and looking at that. And they called me manipulative. But then I thought, people judge others like themselves, My father became a Jehovah Witness in the late 60s, I think. And he was going from door to door talking about 1975. He managed to recruit his brother, but not his sister. So she has survived a lot of recruitment attempts and a failed 1975 prophecy from my father. She knows this very well, and she's absolutely not interested. Then her kid died, my cousin. 40 years old, a tragedy. So what do you think they did? She's absolutely not interested. She said very clear that this is a doomsday religion, I don't care. And she know about the 1975. So, but when she lost her kid, then she's emotional, vulnerable. So she went there, my parents, and they sit down and say, well, Arvid was such a nice boy, such a nice boy. Well, the Bible says we can meet him again. If you just do what the governing body tells you and become a Jehovah Witness, you can meet him again. So they're sitting with her, talking about Arvid, what a nice guy he was, and promise that she can meet him again if she do what the governing body tells her to do. While they themselves have, dang, 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 an existing child, and now a grandchild, and a daughter-in-law that they will not meet because I refuse to follow the governing body. I don't follow blind leaders or evil slaves. And then, after telling my aunt, oh, Arvid was such a nice boy, he will very much be missed, they went home and they didn't even call me and send me an SMS, your cousin Arvid is dead. That's how important Arvid was to them. That he had been dead for years before I contacted my aunt, and she told me that my parents had tried to recruit her when Arvid died. Because behind the tears, oh, Arvid was such a nice boy. They don't care about Arvid. They didn't even tell me he was dead. Also, my grandma died. I love my grandma very much. I didn't get an SMS that my grandma was dead. So, I would describe my parents like this. They have an outward appearance of godly devotion, but there's really no real power in it. It's just fake. So this is my side of the story. If you want to hear their side of the story, you can just walk up to them in the middle of the city where they're standing by a cart that says how to have a happy family life. So they will give you some pointers about how to have a happy family life, because after all, happy family life is what it's so arrogant. Anyway, I always knew my parents would contact my worldly woman one way or another. But since she's with an apostate, and they believe that apostates are evil and some kind my mental evilness have rubbed over on her, they never done it. But I knew they would do it at the time when she's emotional, vulnerable, like my aunt. And they did. They sent a message through a PMO to her, and this is what they sent. When she had given birth, so 48 hours of no sleep, she lost a lot of blood, no sleep after with this crying little precious baby. So my wife was absolutely tired, really bad situation, and while you're also high on more hormones. That's the point where they contacted her with the following message through the PMO. Hello. We would like to give a hand-knitted sweater to our grandchild, but Jonas would never allow us to do that. Can you please work on him? That's the people who said I was manipulative when I gave them a book of baby pictures because I know they wanted it, and they have promised their invisible friend not to go to my Instagram. When I give them this book, they say I'm manipulative. But they leave a comment what you think about this, to my very exhausted lady, that we would like to give a sweater to the baby, but Jonas would not allow it. And then this is a direct quote. Can you work on him? I never said they couldn't give a sweater. So, what should you do? Well, this is my advice. Don't join a cult. Second of all, if someone tells you that you can't talk to your children because he has authority from God, ask him if God has some kind of receipt, maybe a second witness. Quite often they will receive this authority when they're all alone on a mountain with a burning bush, or when Jesus appear invisibly, or when you're all alone in a forest or in a desert or in a cave. If they claim to be the faithful and discreet slave, why don't they have any receipt? Second of all, if you're like in my situation and you're shunned by your parents, they are old enough to do their own mistake. Some people lose their parents to cancer. Some people lose their parents to alcohol. And we lost our parents to a drug that's called religiousness. It's opium. Works the same actually. You get addicted to religion, you get addicted to you go to Kingdom Hall, you get a fix. And then you feel good for a few hours, and then you go to Satan's system where you feel panic all the time, and then you go back and you get a fix. It's the same thing. It's a man-made addiction. But my tip, if you're in my situation and your parents shun you, just let them do that. It's their mistake. But one day, no matter what you do, you will regret it. And if you live your life to please them, well, that's a high price. So live your life to please you and send them baby pictures. I don't know. Maybe they will take the pictures, take them out in the garden and put on 10 liters of gasoline, but it wouldn't burn. So they took 10 liters more and they put on gasoline, and they could see. When you grow up as a Jehovah Witness, you know what I'm talking about, because we always hear the stories about demon-possessed object, and you put on 10 liters of diesel and it wouldn't burn, petrol, and then it burned and you could hear the demon scream. When American Jehovah Witness tell those stories, they took an object out in the garden and they put out a gallon of petrol and it wouldn't burn, and they put another gallon and then it would burn and the demons would scream. So maybe that's what my parents do with the baby picture. They take them out in the garden and they put on diesel and petrol and burn it. And I think it's a cute story, because that means that American demons They are using imperial measurement, while European demons are using metric system. But demons have, according to Jehovah Witness mythology, a tolerance level of 10-liter petrol, or 1 gallon petrol in America. Let me know in the comment section, why are American demons still using the imperial system? Previously, apostates, we have been very bad at communicating. We tell stories about how terrible it was, and we try to talk, and we find a crowd that want to listen to stories about how terrible it was, and we try to find the worst stories ever. So, oh, she's the victim of 5 crimes, she's the victim of 20 crimes, she's the victim of 100 crime. Oh, that's what we're going to talk about. It's a bad focus. Because then the politicians, they go like this, oh, no, this is too much. Tell me this is no longer happening. And the watchtower is like, it's no longer happening. And then, oh, thank God, nothing to do. We put the politicians in a place where they're like, oh, tell us this is no longer happening. So now the watchtower went to the Norwegian authorities and said, this is no longer happening. And the Norwegian authorities were like, fuck you, go home. And that is because we learn to talk about what's happening now. This is not what happened to me. This is what's happening now to current young Norwegians in different religions. And when we have focus on what's happening now, the politician that's alive now and that's in office now, they will act. So I'm learning how to use humor in my activism, and kind of like a stand-up comedian, because then you get to people to listen, because it's joyful to listen, and you don't end the conversation with them sitting like this, oh no, tell me this is no longer happening, and watchtower roll in with their new light and say, it's no longer happening. So I can't take the honor for all of this. I'll try to, but that's because I'm a lying apostate and a father. Thanks to my patrons, and leave me a comment in the comment section, please. It will make me so happy.